Hi traders, and welcome along to our Market Watch video for the month of April. Apologies a couple of days late. I've been out of action myself, unfortunately, and only really getting back into the markets today to have a bit of a catch up. But let's see what we can find and look out for trading wise, heading into a very interesting period typically in the years we head into the second quarter. And there's definitely a few things lining up that are starting to look very, very interesting indeed. April, as I say, our currencies become very, very interesting. Currencies, you see the April performance here, typical monthly percentage gain or loss. See definitely here very much on the currency side, showing strong green. So typically the greener the green here, the stronger the performance. And you can see here, typically one of the best months, if not the best month for the year for a lot of the major currencies. Our equities performing well, as long as a few of our metals and our energy. But we're going to focus in this video very much on the currency side of things. We're going to take a close look because what we're seeing very, very interestingly is the following of what is known as the presidential cycles. And we're going to take a really good look at those now. Just popping straight over here, I'll show you what I'm talking about. The presidential cycle is a different way of looking at seasonality. It's looking at the election year specifically, and the election year we are currently in is the midterm. And the patterns, what we're seeing in the currency market at the moment, are very much in line with what we'd expect to see in a typical midterm year. Not your average year, but more the midterm year. Just looking here at the dollar index. Dollar index, we know in currency markets through February, March, we've seen a lot of chop, no real trend or consistency in markets, and that's typically showing here what you see in the chart, what we typically do in that period. But now we're coming into April. We should be looking at a period of potential underperformance here for the dollar. And there's a few things a few signs that are caught data as well, which is indicating this is very, very possible as we head through the summer months. But definitely for the dollar index, we should be looking for weakness here through the month of April. The euro, obviously, being the main benefactor on the other side of that. Again, through March or through February, March, typically not much clarity or direction through here, consistency. But April, we start to see a bit of pickup. And then later into the summer, start to see the follow through in that. One of the main benefactors, I think, what we will see this year will be the British pound, and seasonally that's typically what we would see. Actually, you can see a very strong outperformance of the midterm year as opposed to a typical year for the pound, and we're just hitting that little sweet spot now. It's even outperformed the seasonal bearish period through March. The pound has been able to shrug that off and just sort of tread water, aim a little bit higher, but not really push that far just yet. But definitely through April. And then into June and July will be a nice period. So if we can find this low, and we may have already made the low in the pound, but then we just have started to make a little bit of push higher. But certainly looking for longs, and there's very interesting signals on the cut data on the pound as well, which we'll take a look at in a second. Aussie, very similar, looking for a little rally in through April there as well. The stocks are a little bit different. This sort of pattern seems to be offset a little bit. We know we performed really well through the month of January, actually pushed higher. So we didn't really get this decline until we went into February and into March, and we're really sort of starting to see that sort of indecision and this base being made now over here, probably maybe about 4 or 5 weeks later than what you would typically expect. But I still think we can push a little bit higher. Definitely towards the end of this month, towards the end of April, is definitely the period where I think we're going to underperform. And the signs that we're seeing in the market is we are going to have one of those years where we underperform typically. But I'm in quite a few stock positions still myself. But I'll be looking towards the end of this month, looking to come out of those, or definitely certainly minimize them depending on how they're performing. But I think there's still possibility for upside, a little bit of upside yet on some of the stronger performing equity markets. And the last market we could take a look at here is one because we mentioned it in the last month's video, and I got a lot of emails about a lot of questions. Was about the 10-year Treasuries, the US Treasury. Now, I talked about the correlation between it and the dollar index. A lot of people were asking questions because they hadn't really looked at those markets before and aren't aware of those correlations. But we're sitting right in the sweet spot for the US Treasuries, looking for making a potential low for the year. It's a real nice point. And I talked about the correlation that exists with the US index and the dollar index. but it typically is there's a delayed reaction, so it could be another 4 to 6 weeks before we see the dollar rally, which would sit nicely with our seasonal moves that we typically expect to see through. You see negativity in the dollar index through April, maybe a little bit of a rally in May, but at the moment everything's sort of sitting nicely in the seasonal bias for weakness in the dollar and a bit of a rally in equities and the bonds. I just had to bring up that chart we looked at last month. There's the 10-year Treasuries to say we're potentially making a low through here a few weeks ago as we headed into the beginning of March, and we have started to push up. If you just sort of zoom out a little bit, you can see the type of moves, its potential coming off here. And I say there was a lot of buying we can see in the COT data coming off here on the Treasuries as well. So that's very, very positive at the moment that we're starting to find the buyers in through there. Right, as I say, that sweet spot as well. For the Treasuries just right there, and I think we could, especially if the indices struggle later in the year, we could see a really strong outperformance through the summer. So it'd be a nice thing to be long off, or definitely if you haven't familiarized yourself with that market, it'd be something that would be very much worth taking a look at. We're going to take a look at a couple of markets just quickly on the COT side. And I'm focusing on the currencies. I said there's something very interesting on the pound. So specifically, let's take a look at the pound just through here. Look at initially at the index, you see it down through this almost at 0%, which would typically be a bearish signal. But to try and understand what the index is actually telling us here, we need to look at what the positions are actually doing. And we're looking at the commercial positions here for the British pound. And the commercial positions they've actually left the market. You can see a big drop in recent weeks in both the longs and the shorts. So typically, whenever we see that sort of action from the commercials, they're handing control over to the other side of the coin, essentially, because these guys are leaving the market. And if you look at actually on the other side of the coin, the speculative side, there's big inflows to the upside on pound. As say, just take that down. You see we're pushing up very high levels towards on the buy side of pounds. At the moment, I'm disregarding this the index because it's telling me it's actually been created by a reduction in buyers as opposed to an increase in sellers, which is fine. They're leaving the market. Buyers are coming in here, so I still think we have a really nice potential for a strong run through April back up. Somewhere definitely into the 150 would be nice, but we'll say definitely there's a nice run here through the next few weeks if we can find a move forward. So nice bullish signs at the moment on the British pound COT data, and it's sitting nicely for a seasonal move as well. The other market I just want to take a look at on the COT side of things is the Australian dollar. It's on my list, looking for a nice long seasonally sitting in a nice place. Technically on the charts sitting in a nice place. We know we've got a nice little trend line level of support coming through here. Price action sits nicely as well. You can see typically these big weekly cycles, the momentum to the downside is a lot less. There's a lot less consistency in the price action. You see price action gets smaller and smaller and down through here. Typically in the way up, the moves higher, a lot stronger, a lot more consistency in it. So very much an indication of a strong uptrending market. We're not seeing much buying yet in the Aussie. I would like to have seen a bit more buying as we approached in this level, though we haven't quite reached that level yet. So we're very, very keen when we get this week's data coming out, obviously on Friday night, or it'll be Friday night UK time. It'll be very interesting to see if we've seen a little increase on last week's, but I'd like to see that continue higher, get above that 50,000 mark again would be a nice area to see. But just to see there's nice buy interest in the Aussie. Not much sell interest, as you see. Typically we see a big reduction in the sells as we move into these lows. You see that just as we come into that. But a nice increase in the buying. So this week I'll be taking a close look on the data comes out on Friday. If we can push up definitely up towards the 50,000 mark on the commercial long contracts, real nice signal. Obviously we can see a continuation of the shorts dropping off, but I'd be very keen then to look for a long heading into that seasonal period through April. So that's the main markets I'm looking at this month. There's a few nice technically a few nice markets sitting in nice positions. The seasonal period sitting nice as well. It looks like we could be coming out of that sort of February, March indecision period. I think it should look a lot better. There's definitely the potential for it to look a lot better for us as we move forward into the next couple of months. Across our currencies, it'll like to be the same in a lot of our commodities. and our indices as well. I think we've got another few weeks, but we were very closely watching price action to see what we can do. I'd say I'll be looking to close a lot of my stock positions towards the end of this month, or if not, just certainly reducing them, but depending on their performance, as I say. Okay, guys, as I say, the main thing, check out some of that data yourself whenever we comes out on Friday. We've only got another 2 days before the update of the COT data. Wait for that the buy signal to come through, or that indication of buying coming through in the on the Aussie in particular. So check that out over the weekend yourself, and hopefully we'll look for some nice positions as we head into next week. Okay, guys, happy trading, and I will talk to you again next month.